who has ever sung the 12 days of Christmas knows Christmas doesn't end on December 25th. It lasts until January 5th. There are 12 days of Christmas. Hay 12 días de la temporada de la Navidad, no solamente uno. And in spite of the fact that well, my father had his Christmas tree down on the 26th and he's bringing the lights off of the house today, Christmas is over as far as he's concerned. He just wants things back to normal. And I know that my father is not alone, but I know that there are a great many people that feel a similar kind of way. And so after all of the gifts have been returned to the stores and we've gotten the right sizes or the things that we want, then for the society, Christmas is over. But for those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, the celebration continues. And not just the celebration, but the thinking, the meditating, the pondering, what it means that God, the light of God, entered the world some 2 millennia ago in the form of a tiny little baby born to a poor family. Por muchas personas, la temporada de la Navidad ha terminado, porque ellos simplemente quieren que sus vidas regresen a lo que es normal. Mi padre es una de estas personas, porque mi padre ha tomado su árbol de Navidad y lo pone en la basura, porque él quiere una vida normal otra vez. Y después de regresar y sus regalos a la tienda para recibir nuevos regalos, él no va a celebrar la Navidad más. Pero como seguidores de Jesucristo, nosotros tenemos la oportunidad de considerar qué significa la Navidad, qué significa el hecho de que Dios, la luz de Dios, entra en nuestro mundo en la forma de un bebé sin poder y sin ricos, que Dios ha entrado en nuestro mundo para vivir entre nosotros, como las Escrituras dicen. Well, all of that being said, I have to give you the bad news now. And the bad news is this, that there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Jesus was born on December 25th. No hay evidencia que Jesucristo nació en el 25 de diciembre. There is, in fact, very real evidence from the Bible itself to suggest that Jesus was not born on December 25th. The author of Luke's Gospel reports that Jesus was born during a season when shepherds were living in the fields keeping watch over their flocks by night, and you'd have to be a pretty darn stupid shepherd to go out and do that in the middle of December. The shepherds would not have been living outdoors with their flocks in December because it would have been far too cold, even in a semi-desert climate like Judea. December was a month when shepherds would have brought their flocks close to home, where they could be easily sheltered in the event that the weather turned bad, and it did turn bad in and around Jerusalem. So if we believe Luke's report about shepherds living in the fields, then it hardly seems likely that Jesus would have been born in the middle of winter. A spring date of March or April would make far more sense. So the question arises, then why do we celebrate Christmas in December? Why do we celebrate Christmas at this time of year that could not possibly have been the time of year that Jesus was born? Hay evidencia en la Biblia que Jesucristo no nació en diciembre, porque Lucas nos dice que Jesucristo nació durante una temporada cuando los pastores fueron en el campo. Y los pastores no fueron en el campo durante el invierno, fue demasiado frío, ¿sí? Y por eso en el invierno los pastores regresaban a sus casas para que ellos puedan proteger a las ovejas en el evento de una tormenta. ¿Tormenta, sí? ¿Storm? Ok. en el evento de una tormenta. Y es más posible que Jesucristo nació en marzo o en abril. Y por eso tenemos una pregunta: ¿por qué celebramos la Navidad en diciembre? ¿Por qué celebramos la Navidad en el invierno si Jesucristo nació en la primavera? So why do we want to imagine that Jesus first saw the light of day during a season when the nights were long and the weather was cold and disagreeable? Why do we imagine that Jesus was born when snow lay on the ground and a freezing wind whistled through the streets of Bethlehem and daylight was in short supply? Why did somebody make the decision that we were going to move Jesus' birthday 3 months forward in the year? And the answer is easy enough. The reason is that December is the time of the winter solstice. And the winter solstice has always been a time of great rejoicing for the peoples of Earth's northern hemisphere. The ancient pagans saw it as a time when light finally halted the relentless advance of darkness. Rather than descending hopelessly into the impenetrable gloom of an endless night, the solstice was the promise that Earth would once again experience the rebirth of the light. The days would become longer, the weather would begin to warm, new life would begin again to spring forth in the midst of sterility and death. And truly, this was cause for celebration. And celebrate was what the ancient cultures did. The winter solstice became a time when communities would feast and dance and drink and carouse to express their joy at the fact that the light had not yet been vanquished, that the light would continue to illumine the earth and bring life to its creatures for at least one more year. Las comunidades paganas celebran durante el invierno porque el 25 de diciembre más o menos es el momento cuando los días no comienzan a crecer otra vez. Cuando nosotros vamos a tener más luz en nuestras vidas, cuando vamos a tener, los días van a crecer mucho. Y este momento en invierno es el momento cuando las personas reciben una promesa que las tinieblas no van a ser victoriosos sobre la luz, y que la luz va a continuar a vivir, y la luz va a darnos la oportunidad de vivir también. Y por eso los paganos celebran durante el invierno. Fue una oportunidad para celebrar mucho para ellos. Y los romanos ancianos tienen la misma razón para celebrar. Ellos celebraron una fiesta, como se dice, el Saturnalia. Y el Saturnalia fue un momento para hacer muchas cosas que no hacemos en los otros momentos. Porque las personas pequeños pueden gritar a los ricos y los poderosos. Fue un día cuando nosotros no tenemos que obedecer las reglas de la sociedad, cuando nosotros podemos hacer lo que queremos hacer, ¿sí? The ancient Romans also celebrated this time. It was a time when everything was let go, when all the rules were set aside, and the people could do whatever they liked. The poor people, if they wanted to, could walk up to the mayor of the city and slap him in the face. It was okay during the Saturnalia, only during the Saturnalia. Do it the rest of the year, you're going to get yourself in trouble. It was a day when you could go out and do the things you wouldn't do the rest of the year. It was a day for drinking. It was a day for carousing. It was a day for eating lots and lots of food. It was a day for having sex with whomever you wanted to have sex with. And is there any wonder why the early Christians found that offensive? Anyone have any doubt here why that may have been the case? The early Christians, by the standards of the ancient Romans, looked downright Puritan, and the Puritans would have been happy to hear that. It was a time that the early Christians did not really want to fit in with the way that the ancient society celebrated the winter solstice. For one thing, the ancients saw this as a cycle, as a way by which the earth could be renewed, but it was not being renewed in a good way. It was simply being returned to the way it had always been. It would be a world in which the rich continued to be rich and to take money away from the poor. It would be a world in which the powerful continued to abuse the poor, the powerless. And so the early Christians not only did not want the drinking and the sex and the eating, but the early Christians also did not want to say that it was okay for the world to return to the way that it had always been. That was not part of their vision. They wanted to believe that something new could happen and that something new was possible. There was only one problem. As much as the early Christian leaders felt that the Saturnalia was something bad that needed to be discouraged, well, you know how it goes. You know, I can tell you all, don't go out to a New Year's Eve party, but what are you going to do? Yeah, you're going to say, he's just the pastor, what does he know? If I want to party, I'm going to party. And the early Christians liked to party during the Saturnalia. That was a problem. It's always a problem for church leaders when people don't do what we tell them to do. That doesn't mean that we stop trying to tell people what to do, but nevertheless, it's a problem for us. And so the early Christian leaders began to think of how they might be able to turn their people away from the celebration of the Saturnalia, this wild and raucous celebration that celebrated the Roman Empire for what it was. And they began to think about how they might do that. And they too looked at the fact that this was the season when it stopped becoming dark and it started becoming light again. And they remembered words out of the Gospel of John, and you probably know what words I'm going to refer to. The light shined in the darkness, and the darkness did not extinguish it. And they said, if we're looking for a time of the year when we can celebrate these words from the Gospel of John, then this time is it. If there is a time when we can begin to celebrate the fact that God did something new in the world, then this time is it. There is a time when the whole world seems to come together to help us bring the message that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not extinguished it, and that the light has now entered the world in a brand new way. And the light is going to be able to help us make the kind of transformations in our world that we need to make. And that's why they decided to celebrate Christmas on December 25th, to give people an alternative to the Saturnalia, but also to give people an opportunity to celebrate the reality of the incarnation, of God coming, of God's light coming into our world and offering us a new way of being. Los cristianos ancianos quieren ofrecer a sus seguidores algo diferente para esta temporada. En vez de fiestas y de implorar. ¿Cómo? Implorar. No implorar, emborracharse. Ellos pueden reconocer que en Jesucristo algo nuevo entra en nuestro mundo. La luz de Dios enciende en medio de las tinieblas, y las tinieblas no pueden destruir la luz de Dios. La luz de Dios brilla en medio de la oscuridad. Y nosotros podemos celebrar esto durante este tiempo cuando la luz comienza otra vez a crecer. Los cristianos pueden hacer algo diferente con su tiempo en vez de celebrar con alcohol y con muy grandes fiestas y con sexo. Ellos pueden celebrar lo que Dios ha hecho en medio de nuestro mundo. Y por eso ellos ponen la Navidad en diciembre en vez de la mes cuando Jesucristo nació en realidad. Now I say all of this because I'm trying to help us understand then that Christmas really is not about what Christmas seems to have become in our society. It's not about the buying and the selling. It's not about cutting trees down and putting them up in our houses. It's not about the lights and the gifts. It's not about the TV specials. It's not about any of these things. What Christmas ultimately is about proclaiming a different kind of reality to our world. And I'm not saying don't enjoy the parties. By all means do.
I'm not saying don't enjoy the giving and the receiving of gifts. By all means do. Don't stop having wonderful feasts that bring you and your family together in communities. Don't stop putting lights on your houses. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I am trying to say is that in the midst of all of that Saturnalia-like celebration that we do at Christmas time, let's remember what Christmas is all about. And Christmas is all about the birth of hope. It's all about light shining in the darkness. It's all about God coming into the midst of our world and offering us a different way of being. And if that's the case, then Christmas does not end on December 26th, and for that matter, Christmas does not even end on January 5th. Christmas is a season that needs to last throughout the year, because Christmas is a season, it is a state of being, it is a calling on our lives that invites us to allow God to enter into us fully and to change us and to help us to become the kind of people that God has always called us to be. People who live in loving community with one another throughout the year, and not just for a tiny little season that comes at the end of the year. Ojalá que nosotros van a celebrar la Navidad, sí, es importante, con luces, con fiestas, con tamales, con árboles, lo que queremos. Es bueno celebrar en esta manera. Pero en medio de celebrar la Navidad en esta manera, es importante que también recordamos lo que la Navidad significa. Y la Navidad significa que Dios ha entrado en nuestro mundo, que la luz de Dios brilla en medio de las tinieblas, que hay esperanza en nuestro mundo, porque Jesucristo nació. Y por eso no podemos celebrar la Navidad solamente en un día o por 12 días. Nosotros no podemos celebrar la Navidad solamente por un tiempo muy chiquito. Nosotros tenemos que celebrar la Navidad durante el año, porque la significación de la Navidad es el amor de Dios, y nosotros tenemos que aprender cómo practicar el amor de Dios durante todo el año. And for this reason, I'd like to read a few words out of the letter to the Colossians.